Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. And today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which sees Ghostbusters Frozen Empire coming out at the box office. This, of course, in the midst of a March that has seen a lot of bigger releases. This is the most life we've really seen at the box office so far this year, with January and February being pretty darn slow. And so a lot is being said, a lot is being anticipated for this film. I know that I've got my tickets to go see this film tonight, so I'm pretty excited because I thought that for Ghostbusters Afterlife, this is the follow-up to Ghostbusters Afterlife, was actually a pretty good film, much better than it had any right to be. But right now, a lot is being said about the actual box office going into the weekend, and let's just say, I think a little bit of it is being a little too overhyped. When you actually look at some of the numbers from Ghostbusters Afterlife and you look at where this film right now is tracking, it's not looking all that great for the film, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second, in addition to other new releases and also some second weekend, third weekend, fourth weekend updates for other films. Before going any further though, please make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button, also smash the rumble button as well. Also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification, that way you know every time your video or live stream goes live on the channel. So Tony at Deadline, gotta love Tony. He is definitely making things seem to be a lot better for this franchise than what is actually going on. Remember that here on this channel, we talk about the actual box office. We talk about real numbers. We try not to fall into the trap that Tony and many other people that cover the box office tend to fall into with overhyping or understating certain things. We try to look at the numbers as they actually are. And Tony's saying it's the franchise heading towards $1 billion. That makes it seem like a lot better than what's actually going on. You hear $1 billion, you think, whoa, that's a lot of money. But when you actually get to the very beginning of the article, you see, wait a minute, let's actually talk about the film itself coming out this weekend. So it says Sony's $100 million budgeted film. That's going to be a very important number, right? $100 million it costs to make Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, is looking at a $45 million opening domestically this week, give or take, meaning the film could make a little bit more than that, could also make a little bit less than that. Box Office Pro has a projection that is coming in much lower than that $45 million projection. The previous installment of Ghostbusters, released during the pandemic in 2021, directed by Jason Reitman and produced by late Ghostbusters filmmaker Ivan Reitman, opened to $44 million and lagged out to $129 million. Now, of course, Tony's going to always love to bring up the pandemic and other things like it, but what's interesting about this is that the $44 million opening, if you're going to say that is what the opening was during the pandemic when less people are going to see movies, and this movie is projected to make $45 million when there has been not a shred of pandemic in now at least a few years, you can see why there should be a little bit of concern, right? You would think more people are available. People really enjoyed the first one, and so you would think that more people would be wanting to go see this one. But that's not actually the case. This film looks like to only do marginally better than what the original film did back in 2019, again, of this recent series. And when you think about how the ticket prices in 2021, even, right, just a couple of years ago, right, only just a few years ago, were actually a lot less versus what it is today. Meaning, right now, even at that high end of $45 million, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is expected to have a lower opening weekend as far as the actual ticket sales are concerned. Now, this is the reason why I said, right, when you look at these numbers and you look at how Tony is talking about $1 billion, makes it sound really good. 45 million, hey, that's more than 44 million. But when you look at the actual real numbers and when you think about actual ticket sales, this is actually not really a good sign for the film. It gets even worse when you go over to Box Office Pro, because right now their projections have the average opening of what they're expecting around 39.5 million. So less than the 2021 opening, and take into account ticket sale prices, that's a lot less tickets being sold when you have that comparison. Now, let's go ahead and actually look at what their range for the film is, right? So they do think 45 million is the high end. So Tony and the so-called industry experts, they're thinking that it could be 45 million, could be a little higher, could be a little lower, whereas people at Box Office Pro think 45 million is the high end of what it's likely going to make. We all know, though, of course, Box Office Pro can sometimes be wrong. Sometimes they can be very right, though. They're one of the only sites that actually predicted the success of Barbie, right? Everyone else was projecting something a lot lower. They were able to get it right with their social media coverage. Ghostbusters, they can, again, 35 to 45 million. So we could see a number in that range. We could see it be a little bit higher, but that also technically means we could see it even be a little bit lower. Now, I myself am going to see the film. I got my ticket tonight. Pretty excited for it. I really like the first film in this reboot of the franchise. But ultimately, I think that the trailer, it leaves some to be desired, right? It's really cool seeing, obviously, the original Ghostbusters back in action. I do like a lot of the new characters that were added in Ghostbusters Afterlife. But at the same time, it definitely comes across as a movie. It's for a very specific niche audience, and right now, this is the kind of money you would you really see from a more niche audience, and not really something that seems to be likely to bring in a lot of regular general audience moviegoers, and that's kind of something that you need in today's marketplace, right? This film needing to make somewhere between $250 and $300+ million to break even. $45 million sounds really good on paper, but is it going to hold, especially with Godzilla and the MonsterVerse film coming out next weekend? I don't think a lot's expected from that film either. And again, I talked a little bit about the MonsterVerse box office and how a lot of times people don't really talk about the reality of how poorly those films have been doing in relationship to their budget specifically. But that's something I'll talk about next weekend. Right now, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, though, $39.5 million, definitely not a good number for it. A lot lower than some of the more recent releases that we've seen from other films, other franchises. And also, again, how many tickets is being sold for this movie versus how many were sold for Afterlife. You would technically want to be seeing an uptick, right? You'd say, hey, people were not expecting a whole lot from this reboot, and so people came out of it very pleasantly surprised. So that audience should theoretically be growing between that release and this release. Right now, the numbers as they're being projected does not seem to be showing that is the case. And again, that is something that should be concerning. Now, we do have some more numbers also for Kung Fu Panda 4. So this film dropping another 44%, so still hanging around pretty strong there. Dune Part 2 also expected to drop around 44% as well. So another $15.9 million, bringing its total domestic to $231.6 million. Again, I talked about how this film still has a little ways to go to make its money back. I do expect it fully to do so, but because it's making so much more money internationally, and because you get so much less return on investment from those international markets, especially from China, it means that it still has a little ways to go. Making more money here domestically, holding strong here domestically, continuing to do so is a good thing because it gets a much larger percentage of that cut. So it's going to want to see these kinds of holds domestically, whereas internationally, it's going to obviously need to make a lot more than expected just because of that small take. Arthur the King, I believe, is the only film in its second weekend of release, dropping 48%, so not a terrible hold for a film like that. And then a new film from Neon, a new horror film called Immaculate, which I have no interest in seeing because I don't do horror films, and also especially when you add in the whole dynamic of it being a nun, yeah, it's going to bother me a bit. And I hate when films do that, especially when they take into account aspects of the faith. I think that it could be pretty ridiculous. But with that being said, Immaculate expected to make around $3.9 million. I think Sydney Sweeney is in that, so a lot of people are talking about it for that reasons. And I just think the whole talk about that is kind of overall ridiculous. Now going to the charts, because we love doing charts here over at OMB Reviews, right? We can look at some of these numbers here. So Ghostbusters, because of that $100 million budget, again, needs to make roughly $250 million to upwards of $350 million just to break even. Again, that is pretty much the standard what we see these days. So a $45 million opening would not be terrible domestically, but if we're going to be looking at these numbers, we're going to have to think about, okay, how much is it going to make worldwide? Is it going to be able to match the $80 million worldwide opening of Kung Fu Panda 4? It's probably not going to get anywhere close to the $178 million opening for Dune Part 2. And again, that film has a higher budget, but because of that higher budget, it has a little bit ways to actually break even. $80 million is what the worldwide numbers were for Bob Marley One Love. Is it going to be able to even match Bob Marley? Again, that's going to be a very big question. I think that ultimately we have to look at the film and say, is it going to get to or close to $100 million worldwide? And if not, how far below that $100 million does it actually get to? Because that's going to be kind of the metric of success, or of potential success, we should at the very least say. Because again, if it doesn't do as well as Bob Marley film, doing better in its worldwide opening versus a Ghostbusters movie, that definitely should be concerning. You look at $108 million for the Aquaman movie. How terrible that film was. Again, does it come in underneath that? Does it come in underneath the $108 million for Trolls Band Together? Does it get close to the Napoleon worldwide opening of $78 million? Does it get close to the $108 million opening for the Marvels, $98.5 million for the Hunger Games? So hopefully you're seeing, right, that I'm mentioning these different franchise movies and how well they actually did. And so domestically with a $45 million, roughly $45 million start, that would be okay, but it would have to also be doing pretty well internationally if it was going to even get close to any of those numbers. I think it's going to do better than the worldwide opening of Madame Web, which is, again, a great thing. But Madame Web also had a $100 million budget, so it'll be interesting to see how the film actually compares. I do not suspect that Ghostbusters is going to have a similar box office run to that movie. I have not seen the film yet, so I don't know if the film is going to be any good or not. It seems like it has a lot of potential, but as of right now, I think that any of the hype going into this movie, again, not necessarily talking about it as the quality of the film, but we're talking about it from a box office standpoint, things really aren't looking as good as some might be trying to spin it or some might be trying to say that it's actually doing. It all comes down to where this film stands in relationship to the original, in the reboot series, right, of Afterlife, where that film did, how that film performed versus where this film is expected to perform going into the weekend. Again, these are just projections, right? So obviously a lot of this can change by Sunday, but just based on these initial projections, these are not very good numbers for it. Doesn't mean it's not going to break even. Doesn't mean that it's not going to make some money. But I think ultimately when you look at the grand scheme of things, there is a lot to be concerned about here. And let me go ahead and see if I can actually find really quick the numbers here for Ghostbusters. And so Ghostbusters Afterlife opened to $60 million worldwide. And so I think that that's going to kind of be the metric. How much higher than Ghostbusters Afterlife does this new film actually perform? By the second weekend, that film got to $115 million. And then by the end of its run, around $196 million, close to $200 million worldwide, which means it made a little bit of profit. But again, that's using a more traditional box office metric. This was during the COVID times, so you had different theatrical release schedules, you had different theatrical windows, and so the nature of the box office was starting to change as far as how much you actually got because of the contracts changing. Those theatrical windows had a big part of that. Shout out to Valiant Renegade. He did a great job talking about this and breaking this down, and has been breaking this down for many years now at this point, it seems. And so I think that that's going to be the ultimate takeaway, is how well does this do compared to Afterlife? And right now, the opening weekend, at the very least, just looking at the opening weekend, it's not looking like the domestic numbers are going to be anywhere close to where it needs to be if it's going to be hoping to be a huge box office success. But we have to, of course, wait and see for those numbers to come out. But what are your thoughts about this? Do you think that Ghostbusters is going to be a huge hit? Right now, it does not seem to be the case based on the numbers that we are getting, especially those numbers from Box Office Pro. Again, this film comes underneath that of the 2021 Ghostbusters Afterlife. That's not going to be a very good sign, a very good start. Internationally, it might do a little bit better. But yeah, let's just say I'm not as optimistic about these numbers here based off of what we're seeing right now. But what are y'all's thoughts? Are you going to see the film? Are you excited for the film? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, loud of that fire button, obviously smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members for the month of March, starting off with Father Luca Illich, Rosetta Allen, check out her YouTube channel being Eagle Rider. Miss Mon Muses, check out her YouTube channel as well by the same name. Matt317, check out his Twitch channel by the same name. Mr. Roy and the K-Man, check out the K-Man's website at xtheboundaries.co. If you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, or if you want your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, make sure to check out the top link in the video description on how you can find out where to join on Patreon, Subscribestar, YouTube channel memberships, pretty much anywhere that you can think of that you would have as a mainstream source to be able to support the channel. You have the means to do so, and you get also special perks like having access to an exclusive podcast that I do every single month, access to a giveaways channel that I host on my Discord channel, and also, of course, the ability to have your channel shouted out at the end of every single live stream. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.